Welcome to the Mastering the Game of Life podcast. In this podcast, there'll be insights around 3 key areas to mastering the game of life: purpose, prosperity, philanthropy. Your host, Paul Lowe, the third sector mentor, is the founder of Hearts Global CIC, which along with many other of his charitable commitments has been responsible for positively impacting thousands of people's lives, particularly young people from disadvantaged communities. Author of Mastering the Game of Life, From Pain to Purpose, and Speaking from Our Hearts books. Introducing your host, Paul Lowe.
A very warm welcome to this Mastering Life podcast, and I am extremely honoured to have with me and I will use the word legend in an era where the word legend these days is thrown around like confetti, but the gentleman that is about to be unfolded is absolutely a legend in football, and particularly in Nottingham Forest folklore, because he was a player, he was a manager, he was a chairman, he's a current ambassador, and I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I've got this wrong, the Vice Chair of the League Managers Association. So without further ado, it is, as I say, my great honour and privilege to introduce Mr. Frank Clark.
Hi, Paul. Good to be here. Yeah, that was all right. Very spot on. You've obviously been doing your homework.
Yeah, as I say, things change. They say a week's a long time in politics, but I'm sure you know better than most that in football it's an absolute eternity.
Absolutely, yeah, especially the way the game is now.
Yeah, okay. So I'd like to start, Frank. I mean, as I said, we've worked together before on a book, Speaking from Our Hearts, which you did a story, Lucky Jim and His Guitar. I don't want to delve too much into that book because that's now history. I want to focus more, if we can, on your new book, Black and White and Red All Over.
Yeah, well, that'll be very kind of you. It's more of an autobiography.
Okay.
I did a book previously which was about the game from my own experiences, but this is more or less a biography that I've done with Terry Bowles.
Terry Bowles, yeah, okay. So do you want to give us a bit more of an insight, Frank, how deep you've gone on that, some of the things? Because certainly from a podcast point of view, what I always say to my guests is, particularly the sports people, we don't really want to dig too deep about, the goals you've scored or the championships you've won or whatever.
It won't take you long to talk about the goals I scored, Paul, that's for sure. about 30 seconds.
Yeah. So more, what I try and do is scratch below the surface and in the context of your good self, Frank, educate listeners around Frank the man rather than Frank the football or Frank the chairman.
Well, the book probably wouldn't do that. We had to leave a lot out, actually.
Right.
There was, quite a bit that I'd hoped we could get to talk about more about my childhood,
okay.
More about the cricket that I played in the Northeast. But there was so much to talk about and so much to get in there that obviously we had to leave some of it out. So I don't think there's any great deep examinations of my character in there.
Right, because we did, I know, on the previous book that we did together, Frank, we did kind of flirt, I wouldn't say to a deep level, but we did touch on the more personal side of your life, didn't we? Yeah,
we did. You were trying to flag up the differences in people's upbringing and what difference it can make to them.
Yeah.
And we tried to contrast what I thought was an incredibly happy, secure childhood and upbringing with the difficult time that you had, and I thought you pulled that out really well in your book.
Yeah, and one of the examples you cited at the time, Frank, and I'll quote from our book, was the nature versus nurture debate that's seems to have been going on since the year dot. And I think you actually singled out George Best as a prime example.
Well, yes, I mean, you're right, the debate will go on forevermore. And the sort of bias from each to the other kind of changes with different eras, I think. But I think we were talking about, I read a bloke who'd written a book who said George Best was only a great player because he worked hard and was brought up in a football environment in Belfast. And I said, well, I had a very similar upbringing in a football mad environment in the northeast of England, and I could have trained 24 hours a day and would never have had the abilities that George Best had. Mm. So there is there's an argument of what the percentages are, but there's no doubt that that both nature and nurture play a very important part in anybody's character and character building.
I know when I did my teaching degree, we had to study that very concept. And, for me, no pun intended here, but I don't think you can make it as black and white as it's one or the other.
No, that's what I'm saying. I think there's both play a part. I was also very fortunate in the schools I went to. The primary school was only you would class it as, in those days, a run-of-the-mill primary school, but I thought it was an excellent school. I then was fortunate enough to get to a grammar school. And I know they've gone out of fashion now, but it was a perfect environment for me in terms of the facilities, in terms of the teaching, in terms of the discipline, in terms of the sporting opportunities. So that had to play a part as well.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, Frank, that word, those words, grammar school, because as we spoke yet again last time, I also went to an all-boys grammar school, but because of the instability of my background, the results and our paths in life were completely different.
Well, mine wasn't all boys, there was boys and girls. I was quite grateful for at times. But yeah, I mean, it does, I mean, people keep asking me now questions about, do you do things that Brian Clough did? Did you, because I played for Brian, and people said, did you pick things up from him when you became a manager? Did you, try to do the things he did? And my answer to that is really what we're talking about. I think you take things and pick things up from everybody you come in contact with, whether it be a teacher, or whether it be a mate, whether it be your pals, or whatever. And you take that all in and you evaluate it yourself, and then it comes out. It comes out in you as you, in your personality. I mean, I learned a lot from Brian Clough, but there was no way I could ever be another Brian Clough. There was no way I was going to try and do that, because the man's incredible personality was what made him what he was, with everything else put together. So I do think that you take in all these influences that you come across. And some you discard, obviously, and some that you think, that'll do for me in the future,
Yeah. I mean, some would say, though, Frank, actually, I think you've been quite modest there, but I mean, you're better qualified than certainly me to answer this, but some would say that Brian wasn't as good at the guitar as you were.
Well, no, he wasn't. I remember once when I went up to see him at his house, and this was when I was managing, and he left, and he retired, and he disappeared. Sometime Alan Hill and I were up there singing. We just went up for a cup of tea with him, and he came back he'd found a guitar somewhere, and he wasn't very good on the guitar. Man, it wasn't in tune when he brought it back. So he asked me if I could tune it up a little bit. So I tuned it up, and he asked me to play him a couple of Ink Spots songs.
Right.
Well, the Ink Spots weren't really my strength, but I did bring a smile to his face, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I've still got that little twinkle in my eye, Frank, about us doing a duo.
Well, you never know.
You never know. You never know. A good charity angle, I think. Okay, so your A-level results, Frank, were not quite good enough.
Not quite good enough. Things were a little bit different then. I mean, I don't know really what the system is now, but yeah, there were no sort of not really clearing houses where you could, and no possibility of sitting it again and having your paper remarked. I wanted to go to university and do a degree in chemistry. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me what I was going to do with it. I hadn't a clue. That's what I wanted to do.
Right.
So I took chemistry, physics, and maths at A level, and I found A level maths very, very difficult. Physics and chemistry I was okay with, and I applied for 3 or 4 universities. I applied for Newcastle. I applied for Sheffield. 1 or 2 more. I got an interview at Sheffield, and I got a conditional acceptance, but I had to get certain marks and passes in my A levels. I had to get, in fact, either an A, B, C. It was marked in those days, A, B, C, D, E, and I had to get above a C in all 3 to get accepted.
Right.
I got an A in chemistry, a B in physics, and a C minus in D, in fact, in maths.
Right.
So I didn't get in. My biggest mistake was leading up to the A-level exam. I wasn't a genius, I used to have to work hard. I used to have to do lots of work and revision and that kind of thing. Leading up to my A levels, I was picked to play for England youth team on a tour to Israel, and also for the England amateur team for a tour to Italy and Holland. And I took all my books with me, and I don't think I opened them once.
Right.
So I think my revision suffered a little bit. So it could have been that. So I didn't get in. I was pretty disillusioned actually, because I'd got 9 O levels, and very good O levels, 2 or 3 distinctions, and I was quite upset with the education system, if you like. I thought I deserved better than that. Teacher said, well, you could go and be a teacher in the teacher training college, but I didn't want to do that. I'm not decrying teaching. I just didn't particularly fancy it myself, But I have the greatest admiration for teachers. I messed about a bit for a couple of months, really, I have to say. My mother was starting to get a bit anxious at me hanging around the house. I was playing at that time for Crook Town as an amateur, although we did get paid a few good expenses. And Newcastle had been trying to sign me for about 4 years. And eventually they helped me get a job in the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, working in the biochemistry department. And I signed as a part-time professional. And that's how I started in football, really. And it went okay for a while. And I broke my leg. Or Tommy Smith broke my leg. Let's get that right. I'm absolutely sure he didn't mean it. There you go. 1 or 2 people have said he would, but I don't think he would. Not deliberately break my leg. It was a bit of a nasty tackle, but there you go. And I was out I didn't play for 11 months. Because in those days, treatment was very conservative. I was actually in bed for 6 weeks, not allowed to get up at all. And then when I finally did get out of bed, I had a full-length plaster on for another 17 weeks. So you can imagine, like, the muscles in the leg had like gone all together,
Yeah.
And during that time, the professor at the hospital in charge of the laboratory said, I think this is not going to work, because I couldn't work for about 3 months, 4 months. So you're going to have to make a choice. So I didn't. By that time, I thought the job wasn't really right for me. I was massively overqualified for it, and I had a better idea that I was going to be a footballer. That I had a chance. The maximum wage had been lifted. All of a sudden, it looked a much more attractive career, So I decided to take the plunge, and fortunately, I came back with no ill effects and managed to do okay.
Excellent. One of the comments, Frank, as a professional footballer, I was having to distance myself from my old friends.
Yeah, I mean, that's just that, and they all do. The ones who want to be successful. When you say distance, I don't mean cut them off altogether. But people have this impression that it's life's a doddle being a professional footballer. You earn this cash, and all you do is play 1 or 2 games a week. But it's very, very, very competitive industry. If you look at the academies now and the young players, I don't know if there's 1 in 20 make it through to the full-time game. I would think that's being optimistic. So you have to make sacrifices. And young lads, 17, 18, 19, used to like to go out and have a drink. I don't mean big drinkers, but would like to go out. Friday's a big night out. Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
And you just couldn't do that. I don't think I've ever been out on a Thursday and Friday before a game in my life. Don't get me wrong, I didn't live like a monk, but I had a good time the other days of the week. But Thursday and Friday, I wouldn't go. And then we moved house, of course, when I was 19. We moved, as from Highfield across to Wrighton, which is about 9 miles away. And I just lost touch with them, really. So the friends that I really grew up with, I'd lost touch with. But fortunately, my school friends, the people from the 6th form at the grammar school, they've kept in touch, and we're still in touch, which is lovely. We have this lovely meeting up once a year in a nice hotel up in the Northumbrian foothills, and we all get together and wallow in nostalgia.
Yeah.
So that's really good. That
excellent mindset, Frank. So to what degree do you think mindset played a part in your develop your progression in life, and certainly as a footballer.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of football, top level football, is played in the mind. I think I've maybe told you this before, but I loved the profession. I loved being a professional footballer, but I never actually enjoyed the 90 minutes playing.
Right.
People used to say, "Oh, you just go out and enjoy yourself." It was too important. It was about winning the game. Once you become a professional at anything, it's about winning. You've got to win. And as a professional footballer, I felt I had to concentrate and do everything that I possibly could I'm not talking about win at all costs, but within the rules of the game, to help to win the game over the 90 minutes. I was probably too intense to be able to sort of sit back and actually enjoy it as it went on. But I enjoyed everything else about it: the rewards and the training and the lifestyle. The fantastic way to earn a living.
Yeah, which leads us in quite nicely to prosperity, Frank. The Dolce Vita nightclub. Enlighten us, if you will.
Well, listen, around that time, I'm sure it was true in lots of towns and cities, but in Newcastle in the 60s, the nightlife was absolutely superb. We had three excellent nightclubs, and the Dolce Vita was amazing. It used to get real top-notch entertainers there, and you didn't have to pay an entrance fee to get in and actually watch them, I mean, I remember seeing Tom Jones there, Tommy Cooper, an actress called Jane Mansfield, who not many of the listeners have probably even heard of. And you might say, well, what the hell did she do? Well, she kind of paraded around the stage with a couple of dancers in various luminous kind of get-ups, and she went down a bomb, I've got to tell you. But it was... So I was a regular there at the beginning of the week or on a Saturday night. And then we had two other nightclubs as well, the Grace Club and the Cavendish Club, which the Grace Club was the elite, really. The Cavendish was more down to earth. And then we had this fantastic blues club where the Animals started,
Right.
when they used to be called the Alan Price Combo.
Right.
They started there. So the nightlife was fantastic.
So I can imagine... forgive the June 1969 beating Hungarian side up Ujpest Dutcha.
Yeah, that's
6-2.
as close as you can get.
Yeah. I bet the champagne flowed a bit then, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was just the most incredible experience. We were written off as no hopers when we entered it. I won't go into the detail of how we got into it because it'll take forever and people wouldn't believe it anyway. So we were the underdogs every round that we played in. Played against some real top European teams, Feyenoord. That following season, Feyenoord won the European Cup. Then Sporting Lisbon, who were one of the giants of Europe. Real Zaragoza, who'd won this FACE Cup 2 years previously. And then we played Rangers in the semi-final, who were the Scottish giants. And this Ujpest Dozsa, that's pretty close. Don Revy had rated them the best team in Europe.
Wow.
And we managed to beat them 6-2 in the final. So it was just an amazing time, a good team, really good set of lads. And it was just fantastic for me to be able to playing for the team that I'd supported all my life and win a European trophy.
So did the guitar come out that night, Frank, or was it as you purely lifting the champagne?
No, I didn't come out that night. There was a few a cappella songs came out, I have to say, in the dressing room and in the hotel, because the second leg was away.
Yeah.
So we beat them 3-0 at home and then won 3-2 out in Hungary. So we actually received the trophy in Budapest. And the hotel in Budapest was jumping with some a cappella rock and roll, I've got to tell you.
Right, and I'm kind of tempted to probe what went off in the dressing room, but I know the old cliche: what went off in the dressing room stays in the dressing room.
Well, there was nothing hidden. I mean, the dressing room was open season. All the local press lads were in. 2 or 3 of the players' wives had actually gone over there for the game. I mean, I wasn't married then, but 2 or 3 of the players' wives had gone over. So the rock and roll stuff started in there because 1 or 2 of the press lads fancied themselves as singers as well, and then carried on when we got back to the hotel. I mean, the only thing that happened in the dressing room that you might find amusing, it was very amusing. At half time, we were 2 down, so that was 3-2 on aggregate. and they had murdered us, honestly. We'd hardly had a kick of the ball. They were fantastic. And our goalkeeper, Willie McFall, had been played out of his skin. And we're all sat there, like, heads down, thinking, Christ, we're lucky to still be in this. And the manager came in, Joe Harvey, who wasn't renowned as a great tactician, but could usually find a phrase that maybe had an effect. And he came in, he said, listen, get your heads up. All you've got to do is score a goal.
Yeah.
And Bobby, the captain, Bob Moncur, said, score a goal, we can't get a kick. Anyway, we went out. Within 60 seconds, Bob had scored a goal, and Joe was right. It was like pricking a balloon with a pin.
Yeah.
Because they realised then that they had to score another 3. In fact, had to win 5-1 to beat us. And they'd just gone completely, and we finished up winning the game quite comfortably.
Picking up on your sentence there, Frank, I wasn't married then. So you met your good lady when you was 27?
No, I got married when I was 27.
Sorry, you got married when you was 27?
In September, October of 69.
Right, okay.
So I'd be 26.
26.
Yeah.
Did you want to tell us a little bit about the good lady?
Yeah, I mean, 26, my mother was starting to get worried, how it was in those days. Paul, if you weren't married by the time you were 21, people would start to worry about you. So she started to get worried. I was too busy having a good time. And I met Pam at a party one night in Newcastle. She was working for a solicitor in Newcastle. I took her home from the party, and it just went from there, really. She was a bit shocked when we were walking out. One of her friends shouted at her, "You're only get out with him because he's got an E-type jag." Oh. And she thought, oh, that'll do for me. When she saw my Cortina, she was a little bit disappointed.
Do you know, my heart fluttered that word E-type.
It was a Lotus Cortina, I have to tell you, but it certainly wasn't an E-type.
The white with the green flash.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Flying machines.
That's the one.
Beautiful.
I loved that. I've loved cars all my life.
Yeah.
If I'd never passed my driving test, I'd be a wealthy man. But I love cars. I mean, I blew. We were married at this time. In those days, if you're with a club for 10 years, you got a loyalty bonus of £1,500 automatically in your payment line, and I blew the lot on a Triumph Stag.
Triumph Stag, right?
With my dream car for a while until I came down here and it started to drop to pieces.
Did you ever have an E-type Jaguar, Frank?
No, I didn't. No, I never aspired to that. Really, no.
Oh, beautiful motor. So we move on. You mentioned earlier on, Frank, a certain fairly well-known manager called Brian Clough. Any more insights that you care to share about the man?
Well, only that he was a genius and as rightly acclaimed as one of the greatest English managers of all time.
Yeah.
An enigma. Could be the most charming person you've ever met, and in the next breath could be extremely rude. And arrogant, but a great manager. He had this unique ability to manage people, man management, or you would call it. He'd never read a book on man management or done a course on man management in his life. It was all natural, but he just had this amazing knack of getting the best out of people who work for him. And that's what management's about,
Absolutely.
You, not totally about that. You acquire in football, it's about acquiring the quality players that you can and then managing them to get the best out of them. And he was absolutely brilliant at that. He didn't complicate the game. He had a way of playing that he stuck to, more or less. I mean, even at Derby, the tactical setup at Derby was almost the same as it was at Forest, with Alan Hinton playing as the left winger at Derby. John Robertson obviously was the left winger at Forest, and the other 3 midfield players all workaholics, and everybody in our team knew what their job was.
Yeah,
he never asked people to do what they couldn't do, but everybody knew what they were there to do, and as long as you tried to do that to the best of your ability, you're okay. People talk about him ruling by fear. That's nonsense. We all had a healthy respect for him, and we certainly didn't tried very hard not to get on the wrong side of him. But it was just this thing that, that's what you've got to do in your position. That's what he's got to do. As long as you try to do it and give 100%, that was all he asked.
So, as supporters on the terraces, Frank, we were led to believe the old cliche of good cop, bad cop was the case with Brian and Peter Taylor. Was that the case?
Well, there was a bit of that, but that wasn't that clearly defined. It wasn't always one. You couldn't say Brian was always a good cop or Peter was always a good cop. But they were very, very good at working, sparking each other off. That was a different. You see, when Peter came, that made the difference to Brian at that time.
Yeah.
But people forget. Some people forget anyway, who try to make out that Brian was only successful with Peter. After Peter retired, Brian had the most amazing. How many years would it be? 10 or 12 years at Forest on his own, where he kept them in the top half of the First Division, which is now the Premier League.
Yeah.
Year after year, won 2 more League Cups, produced an incredible number of terrific young players through the youth system. All that with him, and Peter had gone then,
Yeah.
So whilst I'm not trying to decry Peter's input, I'm just trying to balance it out a little bit. That a lot of people have this mistaken idea that Brian couldn't manage without Peter. But when they were together, it was something absolutely extra special. Peter was a great spotter of talent. He was the one in the main who brought the players, and Brian was the one who got the most out of them, got everything out of them, and they were good for each other, Peter was a funny man, Peter Taylor, and he used to make Brian laugh, and that's important, especially nowadays when you're a manager, you need somebody who's going to make you laugh occasionally.
Yeah. Brian, I think, from what we're led to believe, Frank, was very flattering in his approach to you to come and sign for him.
Oh, very flattering. Yeah. I'd just been given a free transfer by Newcastle, which is the same as being sacked, really. The euphemism is they call it a free transfer. And I didn't have too many options. Brian had been tipped off by a journalist from the Northeast that I'd been given a free. It's amazing in these days, but it wasn't very widely known at the time. The club tried to keep it quiet, which was quite disappointing, really. Anyway, we arranged to meet. We arranged to meet at this hotel at Scotch Corner, and so I set off in my Triumph Stag, and it broke down in the Tyne Tunnel. Would you believe?
Right.
And of course, they didn't have mobile phones in those days. I somehow got in touch with my wife and asked her to ring this hotel. And anyway, he waited. I was an hour and a half late. He waited, which was a surprise in itself. I was never late again, by the way. And when I got there, he said 2 things to me. He said, right, he said, let's just make sure we get up on the right foot here. I'm only interested in signing you, A, because you're a left back, and I've got nobody in my club who wants to play left back. And the other reason is you're cheap. So I thought, well, thanks for that, Brian. I know where I stand.
Yeah.
But other than that, he was great for me. He left me alone most of the time. Because he knew that I would do the best I could all the time. He didn't have to worry about me, whether I was in the team or not in the team. I would always be ready to play, and I'd always do the best that I could. And he told me that he didn't want to make me captain, which I was quite relieved about, because I'd been captain at Newcastle in the previous year, and it had been quite difficult because of club politics.
Yeah.
At the time, Sammy Chapman was the captain, but I think Brian saw John McGovern as the long-term captain, because he knew John. He'd been with John for a number of years.
Yeah.
So I was relieved at that, and he knew that I would still play a part in the dressing room, that I could still be an influence on the players. I didn't have to be the captain,
Yeah.
So we had a really good relationship. I mean, I used to have the odd row or two. I don't know whether I told you the story about how he was going to find me for training on my day off. When I first came, I decided that I was nearly 32, that if I was going to carry on at the top level and get a few more years, I'd read somewhere when somebody asked Muhammad Ali about do you train less now that you're getting older? And Mohammed said, no, I actually train more. I feel I've got to train more. I thought, well, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. Like. Anyway, came down here and don't get me wrong, the pre-season was really hard. It was really hard, physical pre-season. But once the season started, we used to get quite a few days off. And I was a little bit concerned about this initially, and I would sometimes just go out for a gentle run just around the roads in Loudon where I live. Nothing too severe, but just something to get my old bones moving, you know. Anyway, a supporter one day must have seen me. He was passing his car, and he wrote a letter into the newspaper and said, what a great pro Frank Clark is. Brian's giving him the day off, and he's out there running on the roads. So I go into the club, and I'm thinking, oh, and he pulled me and he said, when I give you a day off, you have a day off, or I'll fine you. So I tried to explain it to him. He wouldn't have it. He wouldn't have it. So him being him and me being me, I did it, I was told. And at the end of my second season there, I'd played 105 consecutive games. Never missed one. And he called me in and he said, who's right now? I looked at him and I thought, what's he talking about? And he reminded me of that conversation we had nearly 2 years previously.
Right.
I'd forgotten all about it, which was like a measure of his attention to detail, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's incredible, man.
Positive mindsets, Frank. We touched upon that earlier on, and looking for new opportunities, and certainly as your career developed, you did that, didn't you? Because I mean, we've just mentioned around the Forest thing, from player to manager, to chairman, ambassador. I mean, to use one of Clough's, I think, from chairman to tea lady. You was never a tea person, was you?
No, I never made the tea. I used to help clean out the toilets at Leighton Orient and make sure there was plenty of toilet paper in them before the games, but I didn't actually make the tea. We had two lovely old fellas used to come in and make the tea for us at Leighton Orient. Yeah. Harry and Jimmy. Didn't have to make my own tea.
But I think the point there, Frank, is looking for, whether it's in football or in life, because I think there's a lot of strong parallels between the two. And it is about keeping that positive mindset and looking for those new angles, isn't it?
I suppose it is. I mean, I'm not sure quite what you're getting at, but I speak to young managers occasionally these days. Not so much now because don't do as much for the LMA as I used to. But I used to be a mentor, the LMA young manager, and I speak to them, and they moan about having to do this at their club and having to do that at their club, and I've got to pat the skips, and I say to them, well, listen, do you want to stay in the game? You want to stay in the game at your club, and I'm talking about first and second division clubs. There isn't anybody else who's going to pack the kit. Well, there isn't anybody else who's going to look after the skips. You've got to do it. You're the manager. That's part of your task, And if you don't want to do it, then chuck the job in. But, you'll never get back in again. So you've got to do what needs to be done. I mean, at the top level now, obviously, the staff's so incredible. The manager, it's still hard because the manager's got to manage them as well. He's not just got to manage the players. Sam Allardyce usually has a staff of about 20, 21 people, and he has got to manage them as well. But you just have to do what has to be done in the situation that you're in, and or if you don't like it, get out and change it. Do something different.
I mean, to clarify, Frank, on your question, I'm not sure what you're getting at. What I was trying to get at, whether it's football or life in general, we have challenges, don't we? We have challenges in life. And we have a choice to make. We can either get bogged down and feel sorry for ourselves, or we can say, right, okay, do you know what? I'm going to really have a go at this, and I'm going to put that positivity into it. And one way or another, I will turn it round. But that takes perseverance and tenacity, as we know.
Yeah, it does. You're right. And football is, it's like every other industry. That's how it is. And I mean, when I first came here, as manager, the club was at a really low ebb. Everybody was depressed, downhearted. They'd been relegated. The Messiah had gone. Everybody was worried to death about what was going to happen. There were a number of issues within the club that had to be dealt with. The ticket office manager had just gone to jail.
Yeah.
The Bungs inquiry was flying around the club. There was a television team from a program called World in Action, actually based in Nottingham, who were doorstepping my staff, trying to dig dirt on the club.
Mm.
And I had 4 internationals who wanted to leave. So it wasn't an easy environment to come into. But as you say, you've got to sit down and deal with it.
Yeah.
And we came through it. I mean, initially it didn't go too well. Early October, we were 5th, 6th from bottom, and the natives were getting pretty restless, I've got to tell you.
Yeah.
And understandably so. But we persevered. We had 1 or 2 injuries. Stan got injured, and Cooper got injured, and Colin and Colin Cooper. They came back, and then I signed Lars Bohinen, and that was like almost like fitting the last piece of the jigsaw into the team, and we took off from there, sort of mid-October. Won at Birmingham, and never looked back for 2 years anyway. But it was a bit hairy for a while, you know.
Yeah.
Because the board had told me, we don't hear any talk about consolidation. You know, we expect you to get us straight back into the Premier League next season. You know, there's no hanging about. So it was quite a pressurised situation.
I think that was the same season, Frank, where we all went down to Peterborough towards the end. Was 2-0 down after 7 minutes. Ken Charler, if memory serves, and then ended up winning 3-2. Collymore, Stuart Pearce got a goal. I can't remember who the other one was.
I can't either.
Stan got 2. Stan Collymore got 2, but and then the following Tuesday, that was on the Saturday, and then on the Tuesday we went to Grimsby, thinking, that because that effectively did the promotion thing.
Yeah, we were up then, yeah.
But it was a lacklustre 0-0 up at Grimsby on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't very happy about that, but there you go. It was understandable in a way.
Right.
But that day at Peterborough was a special day. Unfortunately, some of our supporters spoiled it a little bit at the end. I don't know if you remember, but maybe you were one of them. I don't know. I'm not too sure about you. But there was nearly a bit of a riot, to the point where the chief of police on the day asked me to go on the tannoy and broadcast an appeal to them, to our supporters, just to calm down and go back to Nottingham and celebrate there, you know.
Yeah.
And which I did. I mean, the scenes were frightening. I saw women and children screaming and running all over the place, outside the ground and inside the ground. And I was quite disappointed on the Monday to be castigated as a not the word that they used, killjoy by the Evening Post.
Right.
In their editorial, you know, which I found very, very disappointing. I mean, nobody wanted to stop them celebrating, but it was going too far, as a lot of people there will testify.
Yeah, I mean, my overriding memory, supporters-wise, in an adverse context, was them scaling the floodlights on that particular day.
Yeah, there was a bit of that, but that wasn't the worst of it. Like.
Yeah, and I must, on a personal level, I personally didn't witness any of that stuff, but I know, I was brought up on football in the 70s, and I actually, despite my life being embroiled in violence, as you know, from a football context, deliberately ostracised myself. From, mine was personal stuff, and I never took that into the gang culture of the game.
Right.
And it sickened me. And I've seen some kind of things that you're alluding to, Frank. I've seen some horrible, horrible things that no person should witness.
I'm sure you have. Yeah. I mean, you'll have witnessed a lot more than me, because it usually happens when we're cosseted away in the dressing room or out of the way, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of successful people and laser-like focus, I'm going to throw a name at you that you've thrown at me previously, Frank. Hilton Smith.
Well, yeah, I mentioned it to you. Yeah, I mean, Hilton Smith is a name from my past. We went to the same school. He was a little bit older than me. I think a year or two older than me. But he was my, not mentor really, but he was one I looked up to. The Nile. He was a great footballer. and I looked up to him as that and as a person. I don't think he ever really had much of a career in the game, but growing up younger than him, I thought he was a top player.
Mm.
And I met him one day at my cousin's funeral, because he actually had a friend. He was a friend of my cousin, and he said something really nice to me that day. I hadn't seen him for donkey's years, and he said, I always knew, and I used to be a big Newcastle supporter. I always knew when I went to watch Newcastle, if you were playing, that the back four would be organised. I could sense your intensity sort of coming off the pitch at me, and I knew that you would make sure you didn't play well every game, and we didn't win every game, but I knew with you and the team, it would the back four would be organised. I thought, well, let's settle for that, Hilton.
Yeah. And mentoring in life and in football, Frank, how influential or important do you deem that to be?
Well, it can be very, very important. Unfortunately, it's a difficult skill, Paul. I think people think mentoring, anybody can do it, and you just have to sit and talk to somebody or listen to them and tell them what you would do, and that's mentoring. Well, that isn't mentoring, I found it quite difficult when I first started doing it with the LMA, and we actually brought some professional people in to advise us and guide us through it a little bit. But it's vital. I'm saying everybody needs one. If you can get one, he's a good one, or she's a good one. It can be absolutely vital. I mean, I don't know whether Brian Clough actually had a mentor, but I know he looked up to Alan Brown, who was his manager at Sunderland.
Right, okay.
And people tell me that a lot of the things that Brian did, he probably picked up from Alan Brown. I didn't know Alan Brown that well, although, strange enough, I actually signed for Sunderland when I was 15 as a schoolboy. And I used to live about 30 miles away. I used to have to get 2 buses and a train to go down to training 2 nights a week from where I lived, to train with the part-timers and the other schoolboys at Sunderland's training ground in Clevedon. And they used to be there all the time. The first team manager used to be at all these training sessions. And he was a fearsome man. We were scared to death of him. But I do believe that Brian looked up to him a great deal.
Wasn't there a certain irony there then? Because didn't Brian take over from Alan Brown when Alan Brown was sacked at the Christmas 74?
No, that's a different Alan Brown.
Oh, that's a different
You're right. It wasn't Alan Brown, but
right.
It was a different one.
Right, okay.
I think that Alan Brown at Forest was a Scotsman.
Yes, he was, yes.
No, that wasn't him, no.
Right,
no.
okay. Oh, right. Okay, so I just want to, as we start to, as the proverbial referee, Frank picks the whistle up to put towards his lips, Worried Man Blues. I'm not going to let you off this music thing. I've got this vision of me and you doing a song
right.
Before, it's on my bucket list. It
All
might
right.
not be top of yours, but
no, well, I'm sure it can be arranged.
I'm sure. So just give us a little insight, Frank, about Worried Man Blues.
Well, Worried Man Blues is one of those songs that all old rockers know how to sing. I mean, I once saw Rod Stewart and Ronnie Lane reminiscing on a TV program about their lives, because they played together in the faces and small faces and all that.
Yeah.
And when they got the guitars out, that's what they sang, Worried Man Blues. Like, all old rockers sing Worried Man Blues. It's a nice, easy song to sing, easy to play. The version I heard was the Lonnie Donegan Skiffle Group, and I always try and get that into my act wherever I'm singing.
Right. So on this proverbial double then, Frank, I can see it now at the Palladium. I can see it. I've got this vision. Things like, please forgive my musical ignorance, but things like Jerusalem, is that something that can be done with it?
No, it's a bit too sophisticated for me, that
Jerusalem.
Is it? Right? Oh,
okay.
yeah. My goodness. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, we're in the right place. We do an annual concert here in the village hall for a charity in Africa.
Right.
There's a guitar club in the village, Keyworth Guitar Club.
Right.
And it's a fantastic place. People turn up of all different abilities, all different kinds of music, and they get listened to properly, and they get a chance to to sing and play, and we'd join in together, and we meet 2 or 3 times a month, and we usually manage to put on a concert once a year for this charity in Africa, the Kadzanuni charity they call it.
Right.
So we're in the right place here.
Okay, well, Johnny Cash was an awful man with the guitar, wasn't he?
He certainly was.
And I like his genre of music, so maybe I need to get genned up on that, Frank.
Yeah, well,
no pressure, by the way.
There's a lot of a lot of Johnny Cash songs are pretty simple as well.
Yeah.
You'll find that most of the stuff I sing is 3 chords at the most.
Right. Okay.
And so Folsom Prison Blues and something like that. We could certainly put that together. I'm
right.
sure.
Okay. I want to close, Frank, if I can, with a great quote. And last time we spoke about this, when you imparted this on, you went to great lengths to attribute this to the late, great Jimmy Cyril. Can you remember what the quote was?
I can, yes. The best, about football, the best team always wins.
Yep.
The rest is only gossip.
What a fantastic quote.
I read that in a program somewhere, and it was attributed to Jimmy. I just thought it was the most amazing quote. He puts it, right on the nail there. And the gossip, obviously the gossip's almost taken over these days, but when you think about it, it's typical of the man. He was a great, down-to-earth character, Jimmy, and a very, very good manager, of course.
Yeah, yes. So, Frank, over to you for the final word then around the book, black and white and red all over.
Well, I hope people will enjoy it. It really is. Maybe it's a little bit too much about my career. My ideal really was to just get down about my life for my grandkids, really, and my daughters in a way, and my sons-in-law who really all missed the playing bit of the footballer, because I didn't get married till I was 27, 28. So by the time my daughters got married, I wasn't playing anymore, so they missed all that. And of course, my grandsons have got grandchildren, rather. I've got 2 grandsons and a granddaughter. They missed the whole thing, so they really don't know much about it, other than they've heard us talk about it occasionally. I just thought I'd like to get something down for them, really, before I got too old to remember it. I'm bad enough trying to remember things as it is. And I bumped into Terry Bowles, a local journalist who'd just done one with Les Brad. Yeah. And I thought, and we got talking, and he was saying that he having finished the book with Les, there was a hole in his life, and he was looking for something else to try. And I thought, let's see if we can do it, because we published it ourselves. I punted around for a few years with various sports journalists and publishers without ever getting anywhere. It's very difficult to make money, with a sports book these days. So publishers are a bit reluctant to take a chance. I mean, the first book I wrote that you mentioned, I thought it was a terrific read for people about football, not about me. But it didn't. It didn't sell very well, So then I'd more or less given up. I thought, it's not going to happen. It doesn't really matter. And then I met Terry, and I just triggered it off, really. So we spent a lot of time getting it down, and it's a pretty fair resume of my certainly of my career. And I hope there's 1 or 2 more interesting things in it about myself and other things. But I just hope everybody will enjoy it.
Excellent. Okay. Listen, Frank, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to go down memory lane, as it always is, particularly from my point of view when we talk about the red and white angle. I'm not too partial about the black and white bit, but I'm coming to terms with that, as you know.
Listen, we could talk about the red and white angle for another 2 days,
We could, people, personalities, and we could, absolutely. So thank you very much, Frank. And for the listeners, I hope you've got certainly some enjoyment out of that nostalgia, but also some value. 1 or 2 very, very good insights from Frank there, not necessarily just about football, but life itself. So without further ado, all that remains is for me to wish you safeness and happiness. And until the next time, we'll speak soon.
Thanks for listening to the Mastering the Game of Life podcast. Drop a line to paul@paullowehearts.com with any thoughts or questions you may have, and he'll be more than happy to respond. Alternatively, check out Paul's website at paullowehearts.com or any of his social media feeds under the same name. Remember, mastering life starts by embracing our hearts.